Over 2,000 years ago, Rome, the greatest empire that the world has ever known, was almost destroyed by a single man. In 216 BC, a great general, Hannibal, defeated the greatest Roman army ever fielded in one single battle. I have done research on this topic over the past 2 weeks, and I've also gradually learned information over the past several years about it. Today I will describe the Battle of Cannae. I will tell you about the events leading up to the battle, I will describe the battle, and I will talk about what happened after the battle and the conclusion of the war. The Second Punic War was a massive conflict between the two superpowers at the time, Rome and Carthage. The most influential person in the war was Carthage's great general, Hannibal. He is the general known for crossing the Alps into Italy and surprising the Romans with a massive army appearing out of nowhere. In that crossing, he also had many war elephants, which he is also known for using in battle. After the crossing, he began to recruit local tribes of Gauls to bolster his forces, and then he proceeded to win several small skirmishes against the Romans. However, after those skirmishes, he won two massive battles against the Romans, killing thousands of troops and completely devastating their armies. However, the Romans were able to come back from this, electing a new head general, who then raised an army of 83,000 troops, the largest that Rome had ever fielded. This general then began to march his army towards the small town of Cannae, where Hannibal's troops were located and camped out. The resulting battle, known as the Battle of Cannae, showed Hannibal's true genius, his great skill as a tactician and a leader of an army. He was able to pull off what many believed was impossible at the time, encircling a greater army with a lesser one. Livy, medieval scholar, says that at the beginning of the battle, Hannibal's forces were outnumbered almost 2 to 1. And because of this, he had to set up a unique formation for his troops. Hannibal placed his weakest infantry in the middle of his line, whereas his heavy infantry were placed at the back and to the sides. Usually you would want to place your heavy infantry in the middle because that would be the spot where the battle would normally happen, and if the middle breaks, your entire line falls apart. He then placed his cavalry on each of the edges to attack the Roman cavalry. The Romans saw that the weakest infantry were in the middle and in the front, so they bunched their massive force as close as they could and charged them like a battering ram. They hit them with an immense amount of force, and that force would have driven the weak infantry back and destroyed the line if Hannibal did not put himself right in the middle of those troops. He rallied his troops, held them together, and instead of completely retreating, they were forced slowly back. At the same time, his cavalry swooped around and hit the Roman cavalry in their flank, driving them away. Eventually, with the center pushed back, the Roman infantry began to go into a bowl, circled around, or being encircled by the Hannibal's infantry, and then the Carthaginian cavalry had pushed the Roman cavalry completely off the battle. They then turned around and circled on the Romans. Finally, the Carthaginian cavalry hit the back of the Romans, completely encircling them. The Romans, having already been scrunched up from their battering ram tactic, are so close together that many of them can barely swing their swords. For the next 6 hours until sundown, hundreds of Romans are murdered every minute. By the end of the day, an estimated 70,000 Romans are dead, with another 10,000 captured. Of the 83,000 that entered the battle, only about 3,000 walked away. Hannibal himself only lost about 6,000 troops in the entire battle. After the battle, the Romans were able to slowly limp back from the defeat. They had luckily managed to win several other battles around the world. However, these helped them a little bit, but their biggest victory happened when Carthage ran out of money during the war. They were unable to support Hannibal, and he had to return from Rome back home. They then were able to swell their ranks, gather all of their full force, and march on Carthage. They also hired mercenaries to further increase their ranks and field a gigantic army against Carthage's capital. Hannibal was sent out by Carthage's leaders to fight this army and to try to turn the tide of the war, but he fiercely argued against this because he knew he would have no chance of winning this battle. However, he still went out and fought the Roman army. He even got close to winning at one point, even against overwhelming numbers. But those numbers were simply too much, and he was defeated, and Carthage surrendered a few days later. In conclusion, the Battle of Cannae was a major historical event that changed warfare forever. Hannibal entered the war in a surprise invasion and immediately began pushing the Romans back. He then used an impossible strategy and and won a huge battle over overwhelming odds. And he then led Carthage's final stand against the massive Roman invasion. The Battle of Cannae, even to this day, is known as an amazing act of genius that is still unmatched. Thank you.